Welcome to Om Times TV, a division of Om Times Media and Broadcasting. Welcome to What is Going Om, for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on Om Times' flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandie.
Hello. Could spiritual suffering be at the root of our modern epidemic of metabolic syndrome and other widespread health issues? Michael J Shea holds a doctorate in somatic psychology from the Union Institute and has taught at the Upledger Institute, the Santa Barbara Graduate Institute, and the International University for Professional Studies. He's a founding board member of the Biodynamic Craniosacral Therapy Association of North America and the International Affiliation of Biodynamic Trainings. He's also the author of several volumes on biodynamic craniosacral therapy. Michael Shea joins me today to discuss his latest work, The Biodynamics of the Immune System, Balancing the Energies of the Body with the Cosmos, in which he explains how the 5-element theory of Eastern medicine offers a method to reclaim your body, heal the fluid body, such as the blood and the lymphatic system, and enact the 4 benefits of your immune system. Michael J Shea, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sandie. Good to be here. Good to see you.
In your latest book, you say that the degradation of the human body relates directly with the food we eat, the air we breathe, and our thoughts and emotions. And we're beginning to hear a lot more about that most physical ailments, in fact, probably all physical conditions, actually have their root in something that is emotional or energetic. So tell me more about that.
Well, I think there's so much literature coming out right now, especially let's just start with, let's say, the microbiome. And when we look at the kind of the disease process and the immune system problems that we had in the last 3 or 4 years with the enormous amount of deaths from COVID, all the side effects that are happening from vaccines and so forth, we see that the immune system was compromised. And where is most of the immune system located? It's actually located in your GI tract. It's located in the lining of your gut. And the fact is that you've got 2 parts to your immune system. You've got innate, you're born with it, but you've got the adaptive immune system. The linking mechanism, the molecules, those tiny little guys that link the 2 together are in the lining of your gut, and it's linked to your microbiome. We have 20,000 research reports on the gut microbiome now, and it's not looking good. We've got species that are necessary for our health and well-being that are they're gone. We're just losing them. They're becoming extinct, and it's related to the food we eat and the thoughts we think and the emotions we feel in our heart that are very, very troublesome in our culture right now.
Yeah. Well, we've been hearing a lot about the vagus nerve as well. And I think I read a report about how it's it's got something to do with long COVID. They're finding that people who have long COVID, the vagus nerve has been out of whack or compromised in some manner. Is that true?
Absolutely. I've been looking at the research on the vagus nerve since about 1990, because that's when it really kind of made a big splash. And I was fortunate to be around some researchers at that time. So I've really looked at it a lot. So if you look at the literature on the vagus nerve, it talks a lot about the heart. Okay, so we understand that the vagus comes bilaterally down from the brain, innervates a lot of structures in the throat and the lungs. So our breathing is co-regulated by the vagus nerve. Swallowing is co-regulated by the vagus nerve, and our heart rate is co-regulated by the vagus nerve. And that literature stayed with us for decades. And we got to know a lot about the vagus nerve and vagal tone, the necessity of having a lower heart rate for lowering stress. We kind of know all those dynamics, but we're learning more that there's another part of the vagus nerve, and from the heart, it goes down to the gut. And it's called the older or the unmyelinated vagus nerve, but it's the part of the vagus nerve that co-regulates our metabolism. And for your audience right now, I mean, we can be talking about neurophysiology, which I love, but if there's one takeaway to understand about the vagus before I get back into the gut, it's about safety. Your vagus nerve is monitoring safety. It's monitoring external safety. Am I safe in the environment that I'm in? Am I emotionally safe? So when we talk about the heart stuff, am I emotionally safe with the people I'm with? But when you get to the vagus nerve that goes below the level of the diaphragm, the vagus plugs into every single organ in the abdomen. It's incredible. And it's registering metabolic safety. And guess what? Because of the food we eat, let's just say the Super Bowl ads in the first quarter the other night, Pringles and Dunkin' Donuts. Are you kidding me? I mean, that is so destructive, that level of processed food. And the vagus nerve then registers the inflammatory processes that are going on in the gut. And the glucose that's necessary to run our brain and body and so forth, all of these things. But if it's too much, the vagus nerve gets overwhelmed as well. And it's registering food trauma, and it's telling us from the inside of our body we're not safe. But we don't know that because we haven't put it together. The side effect of metabolic syndrome is brain fog. We've heard that term. So, and confusion. And if you're watching a lot of radical, social media and television, that setting your hair on fire as soon as you get out of bed in the morning, you can't think straight. You can't eat right because you're just not, firing on all cylinders. That vagus nerve that goes down below the level of the gut, it's totally amazing. And then it plugs into the whole network of blood vessels and nerves in the pelvis. So it's registering everything that's going on in the pelvis, including the orgasm reflex. So the sex researchers at Rutgers University have shown that the vagus nerve carries the orgasm reflex. There's actually a neuropeptide associated with it, and it goes to the heart first and then to the brain. And then we get to have this incredible feeling of pleasure in our body. And I think it's important to add that into any discussion of the vagus, because we're making it look like there's a whole lot of bad stuff happening, and there is, but there's also a lot of good stuff.
Well, okay, then having said that, there are many people who might say, okay, I'm not really going to listen to this, can't be bothered. But when it comes to their sex life, there's a whole other area in which they may say, oh, it is worth looking into this and changing my diet, etc.
Very much so. The dietary component is critical. But, I think, with most of our clients, or the clients I have and my wife, they can't do the homework. They know they have to change. And you have to find where you can enter in, where's the fulcrum for change process in a person's life. It might not be their diet. It might be, in my feeling world, that they need a contemplative practice. You have to have a switch that allows you to go inward and to self-settle. I've been a student of Tibetan medicine for 40 years, and I know the principles of Tibetan medicine. We have everything in our human body and our mind to heal ourselves. But to do that, we have to have contemplative practices. Doesn't make any difference. I'm not here pitching Buddhism or Christian contemplative practices. You've got to have a contemplative practice because you have to go in. I tell you, Sandie, somebody asked me a year ago, could I do a radio interview similar to this about cancer? And I said, well, I don't really know anything about cancer, except that within a whole year, I've got all these cancer patients. And I said to the person, I said, there's one thing I know. When a patient gets that diagnosis from a medical doctor, they go into a state of terror.
Yeah.
They go into a state of fear. And if they don't have the capacity to turn inward and to start reflecting on that and to start self-managing thoughts, moods, emotions, especially, this whole thing about dying and cancer and so forth, it becomes terrorizing. And you basically, you give the complete authority of your body over to someone outside yourself. And my book is about taking back your body. You have the right to control your body.
Absolutely. I am a great advocate of, you are your own healer. You are. You can't rely on other people, and you have to be the advocate for yourself, and you have to learn discernment. And, so many people just give it all over. They lose their sovereignty. And that's sad. That's sad. But, I mean, we are seeing so many epidemics of heart disease, brain cancers, younger people. That I've seen statistics in England saying that, the number of younger people in their 40s that are having heart problems and being diagnosed with cancer, and where they would normally expect someone to come in at a stage 1, they're coming in stage 4 straight away. So clearly, we are having an epidemic, a crisis, and we really need to be looking at how we're going to resolve that collectively and individually.
Absolutely. The literature you're quoting is so stunning. I mean, just within this past year, I've had 2 clients with sons, 38 years old, that died of colon cancer in stage 4. By the time they got to the clinic, it was stage 4, and they were dead in 3 weeks. And they had just climbed a mountain the day before or the week before. And the rates of breast cancer now in young women in their 20s and 30s. And I can tell you, because I do a lot of work with infants and children and pediatrics, cardiovascular disease is being diagnosed in 5 and 6 years old. Yes. And we have babies after 3 or 4 months of birth are obese because of metabolic challenges with the pregnancy. And all of a sudden you've got an obese baby at the age of 3 months. And as they say in Europe, once the medical system sees that, they've got a client for life.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. Why is it all coming together now? Because, I mean, our food, the quality of our food, quality of our soil, demineralization of the soil, etc. This has been going on, and I've been writing about that for 35 years. Why now? Is it just that it's reached an apex, that it's reached that point of no return, and suddenly everybody's crashing?
Well, I think that's a good point. It has reached the point of no return, but let me just back up a little bit. As a student of the human body, the decade of the 90s, was called the decade of the brain and the central nervous system. So what's happened is that since the 60s, we've had just this increase of immune modulators, immune disruptors, endocrine disruptors in our diet, so that we've reached a critical point now of no return. Yes, it can be repaired, but what's happening is people's immune systems now, we are in the age of the immune system. It can no longer it's working as hard as it can, and it's just that one more flu, that one more COVID, that one more vaccine. I had somebody in here last week, a client, 7 vaccines, and they were a mess. And I'm not anti-vax at all. I'm just saying that there's more than enough side effects that we need to look at. So I'm just talking about side effects. So, but at any rate, the point being that the barrel, as it's called by Dr. Thomas Rao, I love this doctor in Europe, but the barrel of toxicity is overflowing. And so that means your immune system can no longer tolerate just one more Pringle. One more Pringle will take you over the top. One more box of Dunkin' Donuts. We have mothers coming in here with young babies, feeding them Pepperidge Farm fish, the ultra processed food. And it's like, how can you do that to your baby, to the GI system? So from a very early age, Sandie, the degradation of our GI tract and the prevalence of social media that is just so sowing of hatred and rage, that's the big trend right now. So all of these factors are overwhelming us, and our immune system now can no longer handle it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about metabolic syndrome, and then I want to go back to, the immune system, the intestines, autoimmune disorders.
Well, metabolic syndrome actually includes all of those. So metabolic syndrome, my sister and I wrote a book about it 10 years ago, and it was actually turned down by the publisher at the time in Edinburgh. It was very interesting. And we found out later that there was a medical team that thought it was too woo-woo. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But then this book got put out, and I think it's done a really good job explaining how we can recover our body and so forth. But here's the issue with metabolic syndrome, because, we could name all these. We've talked about cancer already. We've talked about all the horrors already, diabetes and so forth. But the reality is, once you start ingesting processed food and food that doesn't work for you, you create inflammation. So that's the buzzword. Everybody knows about inflammation right now. The inflammation goes to the lining of your arterial system, and then it goes systemic. So from there, the disruption of how the blood gets through the artery wall and gets to the end organ to feed our body is severely disrupted. And so that's the result of inflammation. But why do we have so many varieties of these syndrome? It's called epigenetics. You and I have a family history from our mother lineage, from our father lineage, that gets passed down to us, and with a certain level of weakness. So that's why somebody is going to end up with type 2 diabetes with the same diet, and the next person with the same diet might end up with cardiovascular disease. Alzheimer's is now called type 3 diabetes, and so forth. So it just depends on your epigenetics and how you were, your whole lineage that's handed down to you in terms of the manifestation of your own disease preference, I should say. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I was going to ask you about that in connection with Crohn's disease, because I have a niece who has had Crohn's disease since her teens, and it's really bad. And she had a daughter who, when she became a teenager, also developed Crohn's disease.
Right.
And hers is really bad too. So,
Right.
There has to be an epigenetic connection there.
Well, I think we also, along with epigenetics, we have to kind of throw in the word trauma right now. Because Crohn's disease, IBS, and those type of gastrointestinal disorders may have a strong correlation with trauma, which can be physical abuse, sexual abuse, a variety of types of trauma, even a concussion. Because what happens in trauma is that the barrier of the small intestine, opens up. Remember, the endothelium changes its barrier, and it allows molecules through that do not belong there at all. But the same thing is happening to the lining of our gut. The barrier function is disrupted, and all of these molecules that have no business in our body, like high fructose corn syrup and all the additives, and especially preservatives in food destroy the gut microbiome. So you've got these dynamics of trauma specifically disrupting the barrier. And that's how this leakage and these syndromes begin to occur. So the repair is, you've got to repair the gut microbiome. You've got to repair the intestinal lining, the epithelial lining, the barrier. So there's that whole trend with bone broth. For the vegetarians, there's another system. So there's systems for repair. And it means you got to put a lot of attention on your gut. But we can't leave out the mind. You've got to have a contemplative practice to help you navigate your own bipolar day with your ups and I call it my bipolar day. You can't escape without some level of irritation or upset on a day-by-day basis. So these things, have to come together. And Church attendance is at an all-time low in Europe. Belief in God is at an all-time low in the United States. So there's a degradation of the spiritual element or component of our life, not just the physical, metabolic, and the emotional. So all of these, come together, and we're getting the tsunami right now. This big tsunami of effect and affect.
But there is also, to counter that, so many people are waking up. So many people are looking at, and COVID has done a wonderful thing because people are beginning to reevaluate their life. So many people stayed at home and changed the way they worked and realized, I don't want to give this up. I want to work at home and be able to take a walk in the woods at lunchtime. And so we have a lot to be grateful for in terms of getting our attention and getting us to rethink, who we want to be and how we want to be.
Yeah, I completely agree with you because I've seen so many people. I mean, we have our category of clients that are still struggling, but, to see a group of young people that have shifted and made the change is very heartwarming in that regard. And it takes discipline, and it takes a time commitment, a shift in how you regulate your time. Most people are spending a lot of time that can't make changes looking at things on television and social media that create unhappiness, that create anger, that create upset. And so that's why you really need to shift time to looking at and being engaged in things that are going to make you happy. And contemplative practice can allow you to see more clearly when you're not happy. But I think you mentioned the world of nature, and I live a block from the beach. Actually, I'm looking out the window right now and I have mango trees and they're all in blossom. So I spend a lot of time in nature because we know the research literature on nature. In Japan, they call it forest bathing. Yes. There's a great book called Your Brain on Nature. We have to be in nature in order to start the healing process.
Well, now you're talking about we need to reconnect, to nature, but also to know that we are one with nature. We're not separate from nature. We're not separate from the earth. We're not separate from anything.
Correct. You mentioned at the beginning in the bio that, the 5 elements, and the 5 elements specifically in my book are referring to the Ayurvedic and Tibetan medical, not specifically the Chinese. But those 5 elements are what we're looking at out in nature. And, so we see the wind and we feel the wind. And I grew up with hurricanes. I love the wind. I'm a homeowner now. I don't like hurricanes, but I like the wind and I have an affinity for the wind. And I can feel how the wind talks to me, but I grew up with it. And I grew up with the sun, and I grew up with the water because I'm by the ocean. And I have these trees out here, and we have our soil where we don't use insecticides or pesticides. So we have an earth element that we keep clean for the fruit that we're growing and the herbs that we're growing here. So that's why we need to have the 5 elements outside and be related to them, because it relates that we are made of that inside. And so if we drink clean water, and if we eat food grown from pesticide-free soil, and if we have regular doses of sunshine that are valuable and beneficial, then we match inside with outside. Very, very valuable.
And we also have to look at the energetic component, because it's not just about the food we eat. It's about, what was the mood of the person who was handling that food, because that has something to do with it as well.
I call that corporate food. I hardly go out for dinner. And we go out, my wife and I go out to a restaurant maybe once or twice a month, just, to get out of the house. But we do a lot of cooking, and my wife teaches cooking as well. But when you look at what's happening with the corporate food, you just can't trust corporate food because it is not good for your microbiome. Yes, an occasional treat. I believe in an occasional treat. But corporate food in general is going to be modulated in a way that is not going to be healthy on a regular basis for you. That in metabolic challenges, if you're going to eat out, or if you're going to have a binge, or whatever your preference is for having fun that one time, you've got to give your body time. I'm an expert in what's called intermittent fasting and time restricted eating, because that's how I lost weight when I was obese. And so you have to give your body time and to not eat, to not put food in your mouth. Okay. Japanese call obesity lonely mouth disorder. Okay. So,
very apt.
So how do you, I say, like, how do you prevent the spoon and the fork from going to your mouth? You've got to put it down. For women, Megan Ramos's new book, she's saying for women, it needs to be 16 hours between the last meal at night and the first meal during the day. I work at a 12 to 14 hour rate at my age right now, and as a man. So where I go 12 to 14 hours. And if you've had a really strong meal the night before, or you've had an extra glass of wine, give it a couple of extra hours in the morning so your metabolism can break it down. It takes time to break all of that down. So,
yeah. And I want to talk about obesity as well, because, I mean, you've mentioned it, and it is an absolute epidemic in England. And so many of our children, and all that the governments are saying is, we need to do more exercise. It's not just about exercise. They say nothing about the food, that is being promoted and advertised. And of course, now we've also got the meatless, trend, which is good in some respects, but in other respects, that food too is processed.
Oh, plant-based protein is heavily processed food. So yeah, that's a huge challenge. Well, my book has a couple of chapters on obesity, and it's important for me because, I have a 100% service-related PTSD disability from the military. So when I was in the military, I was in a pretty severe incident that created the PTSD. And within a month or two after that incident, I started eating myself into oblivion. And I got out of the Army, and I weighed 100 more pounds than I do now. Right now, I weigh about 170. When I got out of the service, I was 270. There's a picture of me in the book at that weight. I mean, it's like, wow, that's pretty amazing. So the obesity issue is real. It's very difficult for people because of it's tied into corporate food and the food industry in general, not being willing to change the dynamics of some of the things that these people are eating that get obese. And now you have the pharmaceutical industry with pharmaceuticals for obesity. I read a report this morning that there's now a pill you can eat that will fill your stomach, okay, and it will make your endocrine system feel as if your stomach is full. And I'm like, oh my God. The issue is, it's called interoceptive awareness. You have to be aware of when you're hungry, and that's a signal, and you have to be aware of when you're full. And that's a signal on the inside of your body. That's your endocrine system talking to you. Those are the signals that need to be woken up. Okay. And I'm big fan of intermittent fasting and time restricted eating.
Yeah, we'll come back to that after the break. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and my guest today is Michael J Shea, who holds a doctorate in somatic psychology and is founding board member of the Biodynamic Craniosacral Therapy Association of North America. And we're talking about his book, The Biodynamics of the Immune System, Balancing the Energies of the Body with the Cosmos. We'll be back with more from Michael Shea after the break.
Om Times TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of Om Times flagship radio show, What Is Going On? And as an author, editor and 13 times book judge who's read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors, I'm constantly asked what's really worth reading and what's not. So I created the No BS Spiritual Book Club to help you save time and money by picking the brains of discerning names who have walked this path before you. There's no catch, no fees and no BS. Just an ever-growing library of 10 best spiritual book lists from some of your favourite authors and teachers, plus free book excerpts, audios and video interviews with people like Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., David G., Lee Harris, Mark Nepo and more. From well-known classics to hidden gems you've never heard of, it's the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to enlighten your journey of self-discovery. So why not join the club? Get inspired and save money at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Michael Shea. Obesity. I have witnessed many, many women who do not overeat, who are obese, who can't lose weight, who probably have had a lot of trauma in their lives. There has to be an emotional component there as well that is also damaging the vagus nerve and, interfering with their ability to control their weight. Because if it's not food, it has to be something else.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I think that the root is likely going to be fear, or in my case, terror. I had to, as I overcame the obesity, that was one thing, but then I had to deal with the fear, from the experience I had. But ultimately, it gets down to the spiritual challenge that all of us are going to face with death and dying, and how we're going to approach that. And I just turned 75, and my wife and I we've done work with hospice, and I've had training as a chaplain and in working with death and dying. And so each step of working with a dying person, I have to confront my own fear and my own terror of that. And that's why I say contemplative practices are very valuable, because, whether that fear and terror comes from a trauma from the outside, there's also some fear and trauma that's generated on the inside, when we don't feel safe, but also because our body, our organism, and somatically, we are headed to an end game. We are impermanent, and sooner or later we will die. And so we have to also confront that level of innate fear around our own ending. As one author friend of mine said, we have to embrace our own inner corpse. And when we talk about metabolic, Sandie, our body has trillions of molecules making up this incredibly complex universe. And that's why, the trillions of stars in the universe are so related to the trillions of molecules inside of us. And there's trillions of molecules dying every day, cells that are dying every day that we have to get out. So it's part of it is just embracing that basic fear we have, and whatever the source of fear might be. It's so important that we have a practice that can work with it, that doesn't lead to addiction, that doesn't lead to alcohol or drug abuse and so forth, that goes on with that base root of fear that's at the root of anxiety, that's at the root of depression and so forth.
And when we have these practices, we become more open to the knowledge that we are immortal. It's only the body that dies.
Right.
And
Right.
that helps some people cope with the fear. Let me ask you, how would someone know if their vagus nerve is damaged? I mean, you've mentioned a number of, conditions and things that are, a side effect of that. But is there a way to tell? And do these little clicker devices that people say, oh, balance your vagus nerve with this, do they really work?
um, the vagus nerve is interesting. As I said, so one of the things we did not mention about the vagus nerve is that it's registering inflammation. I mentioned that, but when it's registering inflammation, it sends signals to the brain to create an anti-inflammatory response. So the research literature got onto these clicking devices and so forth, because about 10 or 12 years ago, they implanted electrodes next to the vagus nerve in the neck, and they stimulated it, and they saw that it was creating this anti-inflammatory response. The symptoms, though, can be varied, in terms of how you would know if the vagus nerve is overactive. It's inconclusive in the literature that it's damaged. There is some discussion that it's inflamed. Everything's inflamed in the body in contemporary people. 95, 98% of Americans have an inflammatory process going on, including myself. So these devices are helpful, but they're also an adjunct to a healthy contemplative practice that allows you to see more clearly a direction that you need to go in terms of behavior and so forth. And also the devices, look, the main device they plug into the tragus of your ear, $600 for one of these devices. I'm a licensed massage therapist in the state. Why not massage your tragus and save yourself $600? Yoga is excellent for restoration of the vagus nerve, because of the way it works with the cardiovascular system and heart. The craniosacral therapy that I teach and the variation that I teach, called biodynamic cardiovascular therapy, are all oriented around the dynamic of the vagus nerve at the physiological and metabolic level. But you have to know, Sandie, it's back to safety. Do I feel safe? How do I know when I'm not safe? Your vagus nerve is communicating to you. If I'm anxious, if I'm irritable, that means I'm not feeling safe about something. Is it internal? Is it external? I'm getting a signaling system. But if I'm dissociated, if I'm numbing myself with food, if I'm numbing myself with alcohol and drugs, then I'm cutting off that capacity of the vagus nerve, and I'm actually making it worse, but I'm cutting off its anti-inflammatory capacity. So huge problems. And I believe they can be solved. And you need a coach, you need help. We do have what it takes inside of us. We have it, and we need help.
Yeah. We need reminding. There are so many things, weighing upon us that don't want us to think that. Don't want us to give up our authority.
Right.
So yeah, we do need reminding. Tell me about craniosacral therapy, because when I talk about that to people, they often say, well, what is that? It sounds as though it's not as well known as it ought to be.
Well, of course, since I'm in it, it seems, and I'm like only 2 miles away from the Upledger Institute, where I initially got my teacher certification. It's really an old therapy. It derives from osteopathy. I don't know if your audience is familiar with osteopathy, but osteopathy is a medical science, and they have the same license as a medical doctor in the United States, and they're prevalent all over the world. But it's the osteopathic community in the 1800s, and then in the early 1900s, they were the ones that started craniosacral therapy and 4 or 5 other types of manual therapy. So it was started in the 1930s by William Sutherland, an osteopath living in Missouri, I believe. So it's a manipulation of the cranium, and it's a manipulation of the central nervous system, and it's very light touch. It's very light touch. But the premise is that there's movements that the brain makes. There's movements that the bone makes. There's subtle movements, and that a well-trained therapist can feel these movements and notice if they're going in the right direction, and then make a subtle shift to get them going in the right direction. It's great therapy for a number of issues, neurological issues. I used it on infants a lot. I specialize in cerebral palsy. So, these children have so many challenges with their brains. And we had big camps where parents would bring their kids to these huge physical therapy camps with the kids with cerebral palsy. So it is very valuable as a neurological therapy. And you have to be careful. If I say it's a neurological therapy, then somebody with an inoperable brain tumor is probably going to want to seek out a craniosacral therapist and not get relief and say, well, it didn't work. But that's not the point. The point is that these therapies, our nervous system, my doctoral work was interesting because in the 1960s, there was literature that said, now get this, Sandie, our human central nervous system is no longer designed for what's happening, the capacity that it's taking on. This was known in 1966, okay? That we've gone beyond the capacity for our central nervous system to adapt. And that's why it's been a cascade. We have all these disorders and diseases, associated with the brain and the nervous system. And now it's cascading into the heart and the immune system and in the gut. So it's just been this whole dynamic of the body degradation over time. But craniosacral therapy now has a component associated with the viscera. It's a major part as I teach it, to be able to work with the viscera and start, really directly inputting to this metabolic problem that we're having in the body.
Well, I've had craniosacral therapy and I'm a great fan of it. And I also recommend it to any new young mothers. Take your baby and take yourself, especially those that have had forceps deliveries.
You bet. Forceps, vacuum extraction, and C-sections also, because of the prevalence, of C-sections right now. So all of these are great things. And actually, I've been writing and working with a midwife, and we've put together a training on teaching mothers how to treat themselves craniosacrally in the abdomen, how to feel their baby, but mainly through the vascular system, and how to also then work with their vagus nerve and help synchronize with the baby's vagus nerve, because that's what's happening in utero. The baby's vagus and mom's vagus are synchronizing together. So you can affect that consciously, and it's a wonderful thing to do that we teach in the second and third trimester of pregnancy.
You write about the 4 foundations of stillness. Say more about that.
The 4 foundations of stillness, that gets into the dynamic of spirituality. If you do a contemplative practice, sooner or later, your mind is going to have a still point, and you're going to go, wow, what was that? What was that just happened? And you enter a domain that's kind of beyond mindfulness, and it's into that non-referential awareness. And so really, the point with that is to be able to access that level of awareness at a contemplative level. Give me your question again, because I just went off into another.
So what are the 4 foundations? You talk about the 4 foundations of it.
Well, basically, there's a perceptual process that goes on with a meditation practice. So, or a contemplative practice, or even a dynamic with manual therapy as I teach it. So there's a basic level of stillness and a sense of openness and open awareness. But when you get deeper, if you can really settle into that, you get into these deeper levels of stillness. And the levels of stillness have to do with feeling that the world of nature has become still, no matter what might be happening with the sun and the wind. But there's a stillness that's innate within the world of nature. And that when you're in a community of people, and my wife and I say this often when we're in a community of people or when we're teaching, and I'll always say it in the classroom, did everybody notice the still point? That as a community, when we get together, we can feel the stillness in the room. And then when we can feel the stillness in our own body, so A lot of people, when you teach them to meditate, I can't sit still. I just can't sit still. I mean, I've heard that so many times. But there's a point at which you have to learn how to sit still. You have to learn how to be still in your body. But ultimately, the fourth level of stillness is really the critical one of how you become more still in your mind. Not that you can get rid of your thoughts. It's not about attacking your thoughts. It's not about trying to get rid of them, but it's trying to move your attention and become more clear that there's another space of awareness that allows you clarity, and that the thoughts are just thoughts. And you have to get away from judging your thoughts. And that's a very, very deep level of stillness, or the deepest level of stillness, where you can stop judging your thoughts and rest in a non-referential awareness, or an awareness without an observer. And you're just in this knowing place. And it's a knowing place of love. It's a knowing place of compassion. It's a knowing place of empathy, because those qualities are innate. They're inside of us. And until these dimensions in us and around us have synchronized with a level of stillness, it's difficult to reach that very deep level where we can experience that inherent love and know that it's there, and know that we can respond with love and compassion, and we don't have to generate it, fix it. It will naturally arise of its own as we can synchronize with these four levels of stillness.
That's the bottom line, isn't it? I mean, whatever we do, whatever practice we take up, the bottom line is always you will rest in love, and you will rest in peace and compassion and empathy, which is such a core, it blows my mind that people don't realize that is fundamentally what we are. Right,
exactly. Yeah, I was saying earlier that I was, trained as a multi-faith chaplain, and so if you go into a room of a dying person, and they're Christian, they might want to talk about Jesus, and it's like I've got to talk about Jesus, And if you go into a room with a Buddhist, you need to be talking about Buddha or whatever dynamic might be going on, whatever deity within that person's individual practice. And then it was interesting because we had to learn how to go into a room of an atheist. And what would you do with someone dying of an atheist? And you try to find out where they experienced love in their life and how they experienced love. Did they have an experience of love? And inevitably, everyone that I've talked to that was an atheist could relate a story, and it could take them into a beautiful place because it's innate. No matter what religion or faith-based practice, you have love in your heart. It is there. And I don't know if you've seen the literature, but no matter what religion you are, and no matter what contemplative practice you're doing, they all affect the same area of the brain. So it's like, come on, folks, get a practice and work your practice in order to wake up love, because it's already there.
Yeah. You also write about the fluid body, and you offer practices to visualize the health of it. Say a little bit about that. Is there a quick practice that you could share with us? We don't have lots of time, but maybe something, fairly brief.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually also an academic embryologist. So the universities and things you mentioned are where I was teaching embryology. The human embryo is 98% water, and adults are 92% water. And there may be some pushback because there's different percentages depending on the scientist you're reading. But the point is that if we are the majority of water, and that in all of these traditions, and including Western traditions, that love in our heart, so love, is conceptual, but it manifests as a light, almost across the board, no matter who you're talking to, it's a light. So the light manifests. And what I teach is in Tibetan medicine. So I teach Tibetan medical visualization processes. Visualization is a medical practice. It is medicine. So I have people visualize their heart as white, their heart as blue, their heart as yellow, their heart as red, and their heart as green. So that's the basic visualization process. And then that palette of rainbow colors You choose one that you like a lot, or that is giving you more information at that time that you keep coming back to, and you let that color radiate through your body, your fluid body, and you let your whole body radiate with that color. And then you let that color radiate from your skin, and you let it radiate out, because the 5 colors that we're looking at out here in the universe are being generated from inside that light that's in the middle of your heart. So that's Tibetan medicine. But the 5 colors, and really allowing, radiate yourself. And it's an evening practice. It's a night practice. I have an eye mask that is a blackout eye mask, and I do my visualization practice in the middle of the night when I can't get back to sleep. And I have a regular contemplative practice where I also use it for healing my heart.
Yeah, I do that too. The book, it's packed with photographs and diagrams. It seems to be directed at therapists and practitioners. How easy is it for lay people to understand and practice the techniques in this one?
Well, the book, all of my books are divided into sections, and this book has 4 sections. So the 4th section is where the majority of photographs are, and those are the hand positions for manual therapists. And I also, Sandie, I believe, and I let people into my classroom that have no background at all in manual therapy, that touch therapy is part of our ancient tradition, and that everybody can learn how to use their hands. I've taught mothers how to feel very sophisticated things in their children with cerebral palsy, and work with it. So the first 3 sections, though, a lot of dietary advice from Swiss biological medicine and the contribution from my wife, a lot of information about obesity, a lot of information about the body in general, and how to view your body and how to hold your body. And you mentioned the word earlier, take sovereignty of your body. This is an instruction manual for saving lives. This is an instruction manual for how you take control of your body. And those first 3 sections can be read by anybody. And I think everybody should learn and can learn how to touch. And you can learn it from my 4th section in that book.
I would go a bit further and say that in offering all those things through this book, you're also offering people a manual for how to connect with themselves, how to, really connect with the love that they are. And that's only helpful to everybody else.
Absolutely. The first thing is you really need to wake up empathy. And so I give a lot of meditation practices in the book. And those meditation practices are designed to wake up empathy. The research is very clear. If you can feel your heartbeat and count to 70, if you can count your heartbeats periodically, that wakes up empathy. It makes you sensitive to what another person is feeling in their life. Sandie, it's just feeling your heartbeat wakes up empathy, wakes up these capacities, and then our capacity to visualize, to take our mind away from the ordinary thoughts that we're thinking so much and shift it into a visualization of these colors, and to radiate the world is to bless the world from our own heart. You can bless anyone in the grocery store, the babies. There was a baby on the beach the other day, and I just was radiating this baby from my heart. And the mother brought the baby up to my wife out of the clear blue. And then my wife did a blessing on this baby. And it's totally amazing. We can do it from our heart, Sandie.
Yeah. So, okay. In closing, you talked about you welcome people who are not necessarily, trained into your classes. Do you do seminars where the public can come and they can learn some basic techniques?
Absolutely. I usually do programs in the summer down here. I teach mainly in Europe, Sandie. So I've already got a full boat this year. My classes are already full in Italy, Vienna, Austria, Germany. Those are the 3 countries I'll be in this year. And then I usually do a couple of classes locally in the summer down here. And I really open them up to anybody, but they'd have to be on my mailing list. So they could go to my website, shayhart.com, and sign up for my mailing list.
Okay. And where is down here?
I'm in Juno Beach, Florida. It's part of Palm Beach
Okay.
County. I've got my mango trees outside. I got my beach, 1 block away. I'm happy in Juno Beach. It's South Florida. It's a beautiful part of the world down here.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. I really think your book is exceedingly valuable, far beyond what it might appear. Don't be put off by the fact that it looks like it's an academic book. It's
Thank you.
so much more than that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandie. Pleasure.
The Biodynamics of the Immune System, Balancing the Energies of the Body with the Cosmos by Michael J Shea is published by Healing Arts Press, a division of Inner Traditions International, and is available at all good bookstores and online. For more information about Michael's books, videos, lectures, and trainings, visit his website at sheaheart, SHEA, heart.com. This show is also available as a free downloadable podcast if you prefer to listen rather than view or want to listen to it again on the move. You can find it at the Times website and on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and all the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Google, Amazon, and Audible. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back with another edition of What is Going On at the same time next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you to Michael Shea.